Welcome back to Interface.fm, guys. Today's episode is very special to me, and I was waiting to do this from a very long time. Today, we have Himanshu Khanna, the founder of Sparklin, with us, and we will be discussing about the history of design, the future of design and technology. The knowledge he has is terrific. So, listen to the whole podcast, and you will hear some great stories from him today. So, let's get started. Hey, welcome Himanshu, welcome to Interface.fm.
Thank you so much, Shashank and Rishabh. I remember our first meeting. I don't know if you both do.
I do. We met at Adobe's Noida office, IXDA.
Yeah,
Right. This was last September
yeah.
2019. Yes.
And you gave the talk on ethical design and responsible design, and I loved it.
Oh, did you? I was super nervous about it. Nervous because this is not the kind of content that gets spoken about, and it wasn't from a perspective of being very, very subtle and how do I say it? Very politically correct. It was kind of in your face, and it was almost against the way we are as designers. So I was definitely nervous. And an interesting thing about that talk, uh, I came to Delhi just for that talk. I was in Hyderabad conducting a workshop, and this was for a group that had flown down from Berlin. We were in this distant resort in Hyderabad, completely living there for a week together. That was the whole idea of that workshop. And in between, I had to kind of make a special request that I had previously committed for this talk in Adobe Noida, and I need to fly down. So I came down just for that talk, flew back the same night.
Oh man. And you took the question so nicely कि एक बंदे ने पूछा if you are a designer and you make ammunitions, how should you design it? And your answer was something like this कि उस एमओ को अपना काम तो करना है बट दैट शुड नॉट हर्ट दैट पर्सन मतलब काफ़ी काफ़ी अच्छा आंसर था नो डाउट.
So my perspective on the whole thing has been that eventually when you're given a task to design something, you have to be utterly, responsible for what you're designing. Okay. Of course, you can create a lot of caveats on top of it and make sure that there are not some ill uses of that. But in 99.99% of those cases, caveats won't work because humans are very different. Humans always find a way out, right? So imagine if I am the designer who's been tasked to create a hammer. Now, how do I create a hammer that nails something into the wall but doesn't kill people, right? Or let's say I am an automobile designer. So how do I create a car that runs super fast but at the same time doesn't run people over?
Okay.
Okay. And I can continue like that for almost every product that we are creating. So I am the designer who is supposed to create the first version of Twitter. Okay. How do I create Twitter in such a way that it empowers a lot of people, it entertains and educates a lot of people. At the same time, it doesn't end up dissing someone to a level that they become depressed. And I don't even want to go one level further. They get depressed to a level that they try and take their own life. You can't do that as much as you should do that, right? You can take precautions. You can create some kind of how do I say fencing around things, but you can't make products in such a way that they cannot be ill used. Okay. Even today, when the automobile is running on a self-driving mode, okay, it has been given all the data, all the freedom to actually stop when they think they're about to run someone over. They won't perform 100% of the time.
I actually remember this whole statement from IXDA. So you made a statement about an old woman crossing the road, and the designer has an opportunity that he can design something that would prevent save lives instead of just doing something unethical. So yeah, that was one like hell of an interesting talk. Like we actually started, a lot of us actually started our design journey back then. Like it was sort of like our early stage, and a lot has evolved in the past year. So yeah, we would love to know more about you
Mhm.
and what has been going in your life during this pandemic, and how have you been managing like remote life, because like as far as I know you, you love to travel, and yeah, so do I. But this pandemic has all of us had in our homes for past 6 7 months. So how have you been going through this remote life these days?
Uh, so I think it's been like a heartbeat, lots of ups and downs. Uh, but I really love the both the sides of it, the ups and the downs. Ups because those are the moments that you can't imagine will come true, and downs because those are the moments that are so low that they end up making you learn something so critical and substantial, right? Uh, I'm actually going to tell you a couple of things that may sound super odd and unexpected of a professional like me. So let me tell you a few things like, for example, I don't know how to cook. Okay. Uh, and it's a very stupid thing of me. Uh, but at the same time, I know if I am ever forced into a situation where I have no option but to cook, I will quickly learn it. I won't make the best food, but I will quickly learn it. And I realized this during this pandemic. So, for example, before the whole thing happened, and before we were kind of confined to our homes with no house help coming in and no one cleaning, no one washing utensils, I had never done that.
Same.
And then one fine day, I realized that this is something I have to do. There is no option, right? I have to wash utensils. And when you have some 5 6 people at home, it's a hell lot of utensils, man. And then I realized that every time I left that sabzi or that dal in the plate, which wasn't completely finished, how difficult it becomes for someone who's washing it later on. Okay, that's when I realized that anything that stays in the utensils and slowly dries up, it's going to become very difficult to clean it up later. Then I realized how difficult is it to clean the tawas and the kadhais in the kitchen.
That is one heck of an addition to a resume.
Yeah, I am a pro tawa cleaner, guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, now like we were discussing, so you said that you we can talk about things that people can't actually Google easily and find out. So yeah, we can start on the history of design. Like I have read like a ton of books, by a few by Bruno Murari and few by the D school professor. I forgot his name. Yeah, but so yeah, I got to know a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have like wouldn't easily have access to while searching the internet. But yeah, I would love to know more, especially from you, since you have been in the industry for almost a decade. I think right now, right?
Actually, a lot more. Uh, I started designing before I got to know what design is, and it's almost like how you start talking and you don't understand languages. It was almost like that. Uh, and from there on, the fascination has grown multifolds because there is so many aspects in design. It's crazy. You can get into anything, and it's a rabbit hole. And fortunately, I've been able to get into too many rabbit holes thanks to my profession, thanks to the kind of projects we've been dealing with, thanks to the clients we have had, and of course, purely out of curiosity. So, for example, started reading this book lately. I'm going to come to the name of it a little later, but there's this amazing chapter in the beginning of it, which which in I can say 5 minutes defines what design is and how we are lacking it today. Okay. So the book uh, talks about design in the world. Okay, and this particular chapter talks about how a cathedral took almost 100 years to be created. Okay, more than 100 years, to be very frank. And this cathedral is Notre Dame, which is in Paris. And interestingly, now twice as many people used to visit this cathedral, and twice as many than Eiffel Tower, which is what Paris is really known for. The architecture is that beautiful. I can tell you because I've been there. I can tell you because overall Paris is almost like a fairyland. Okay, I can tell you because even if you're walking through a typical park of Paris, you will see trees cut as if, someone took a laser and started cutting them. They are that well aligned. They are that precisely cut. I don't know how they do it, but it's been like that. Okay, coming back to the cathedral, which took more than a century to get built. Okay, the same cathedral took 6 years for a fire alarm system to be created for it. So, what is the agenda? What is the goal of that fire alarm? To make sure if there is ever an incident of fire, okay, there is not too much destruction. They took 6 years to map out the whole cathedral to understand how things are going to work. Can you imagine the amount of work put into it, the thought put into it? And this is by more than a dozen people together, right? All of them were designing a system that is supposed to protect this really old cathedral that took almost a century to be built. Okay, so you see there's a lot riding here, right? It's supposed to be priceless, precious, and all those synonyms that you want to put there, right? There are so many people visiting it almost on a daily basis. And yet, last year, when the fire did break, it took that guard more than 30 minutes, more than 30 minutes to even understand where the fire is. Okay, and fire doesn't wait, right? 30 minutes is a long, long time. Okay, why did it happen? Think now from a designer's perspective. Okay, uh, the overall architecture of the cathedral is quite complicated. Okay, the cathedral is divided into two halves. Okay, then there are floors in the cathedral. Okay, and this particular guard was actually doing an extra shift trying to cover for a co-worker who didn't show up. Okay, and this guard was very, very new to his job. Perhaps there was no training given to the guy. Okay, and when he eventually saw the alarm, the screen was showing some kind of code. Imagine the screen showing DL13221458. What do you understand out of it? So a bunch of people who are supposedly experts took 6 years to map out the whole thing, to create it in such a foolproof way that it is able to prevent massive destruction, came up with a solution which gave this output. Okay, so this is where design falters. This is where we are not thinking through. And this is exactly what I was trying to talk in the previous Adobe talk as well, that when we are designing something, because of this indirect relationship that we have of cause and effect, we are not able to imagine the kind of responsibility we have at hand. Okay, we are not surgeons in the room wearing a mask with all of the whole body sanitized in that almost vacuum kind of room trying to work on someone's brain. We know that one centimeter here and there, or probably 1 millimeter here and there, could probably kill this person. That is as direct as it can be, right? And that is the reason they end up taking their job a lot more seriously. They know a lot is riding on that, right? And that is why they have rules. That is why they have a set of ethics. That is why they are not supposed to go down the surgery mode if they've had any kind of intoxication for last 12 hours or so, right? We don't have anything like that. In fact, for someone like me who doesn't drink too often, I've been asked multiple times that how do you design? Oh, really? You don't drink, you don't smoke, uh, you don't even take drugs, is it? No. Oh, wow. How do you feel creative then? So can you imagine the kind of cliche that's been attached to our profession? Okay, it's almost the opposite of something which is responsible. We are supposed to perform the best when we are under intoxication. This is the truth of design today.
Unfortunate,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I been there. Like uh, a couple of times, some friends have been like, try smoking weed or something, and like you'll do great design. But like I've been as far from smoking as it can get, so never tried anything. But yeah, like a lot of my colleagues who smoke, not all of them, but yeah, who smoke, they have been saying that they have fun when intoxicated, and then they design. So yeah, it is an unfortunate situation. But yeah, I would love to know the name of the book.
So the book is called How Design Makes the World. I think it has about 20 chapters or so. And Scott Birkin is the author. I think it got released earlier this year, or maybe later last year.
Nice. I'll add the link in the description as well. Okay, let's go to the next question. So, we have discussed about the history of design, and we have seen the technology has changed drastically. Things we were using in 90s like cell phones was a very different approach of interaction with the phones.
Hmm.
Now we are interacting through touch screens in our smartphones. So what do
Hmm.
you think, where are we right now in terms of user
Hmm.
interface, and where are we going in the future?
So if there was a certain kind of timeline to design, and on a scale of 100 on that timeline, I think we're somewhere at 4 or 5. Okay. So think of design as something that has just started. Okay. We are yet to make that what Steve Jobs used to call ding in the universe, right? We are yet to understand what design really is. Our today is very much confused in between figuring what a UI versus product versus UX versus interaction versus motion versus, and it just goes on. We are too much tied to these titles. We are not really worried about the goal, the intent, or the impact of our design, but what are we called? What does the world think of us? We we don't think how are we affecting the world, but we do get carried away with uh, how does the world treat us, right? And that is the nascent stage for any and every industry that has been there, right? I think it's easier to draw a parallel with technology because technology used to be that, and even today, for the amateurs who are starting in technology, they get carried away by the context of, oh wow, let's pick PHP over a certain other technology, or let's pick something which is recent most like Node, and not to take up a primitive technology like .NET, right? The amateurs today still get swayed by this instead of figuring which technology is going to be a lot more useful for what I'm making today, right? But overall, technology as a stream has matured enough that people are talking about problems and sharing solutions openly. And that is where the concept of open source came in. which is yes yet to be kind of internalized in the design stream of things. We are still too secretive about who we are. I don't want to share my design principles or my design processes with the world, right? I think my frameworks are still mine. And that is the mode that I have. That is the reason why someone should come to me and not go to you,
Yep.
right? We are still a lot about patting each other's back or giving ego massages. We are yet to mature out of it and think of ourselves as a greater community, right? The community angle of the design or the creative side of things is still a big miss. If you see geeks, if you see technology, if you see any other streams like that, the community angle to their streams is huge,
Yep.
right? They will go to any lengths to help each other without expecting anything in return. Okay. Okay. Let's move out of technology for a bit and see it in any other stream's perspective. Journalism. Great. People are crazy. They are ready to help another fellow journalist without even knowing them in person, right? And same is true for so many other industries. But design, because we are still trying to, wrap our head around what design really is, we end up creating these walls around ourselves. Okay, these walls are, between one designer and the other because I know more than designer two. These walls are between a designer and a client because I know more than the client, right? And these walls are between the designer and the world because the world has no idea what it needs. But as designers, we fail to understand that this is our true calling, figuring out things before people start demanding them. Okay. And probably providing them in such a way that it doesn't become a huge friction. I guess it is happening because of this longer period of cause and effect that we do something in 2007 and we see the impact in 2020, right? That's a huge period. The minute that period kind of gets reduced to, let's say, a year or a month or a week, we might start taking ourselves a lot more seriously. And when I say us, I mean as a community, and I don't mean just you yourself.
True.
Yeah, speaking of modern technologies, we were. So, what are your thoughts on upcoming technologies that are like designers are those technologies are actually so fancy right now that designers are trying to jump the bandwagon.
So, to sum it up, this question is basically a designer should use Figma or Sketch or any other tool. I guess we all get this question very frequently. And would you like to address this problem?
So, like I said, I think the whole concept of nascent stage of design in general is the reason we end up, arguing about tools. Uh, One, that, and second, of course, the level of exposure of design, the understanding of design. We still don't understand design as something that is resulting in just a visual output. uh, we are we are yet to see design as something that is almost invisible in our lives. The minute that starts happening, we will understand that tools have no say. The process, the intent, the goal has a huge say. Probably tools will get taken over by processes in some time, and then frameworks and methodologies and so on. But till the time we understand what design really means, it's going to take time, and it's going to be a long time before that happens. Yet at the same time, as designers, it's important for us to keep sensitizing people on how tools don't matter and design is somewhere else. Design happens outside the toolbox. So this is something we have started experimenting in Sparkland. I don't know if we're going to succeed or fail, but of late, what we do is we don't design in a Figma or a Sketch or XD.
Mm-hmm.
Those are meant for pure execution.
Totally.
Okay, what we really want to design in is, let's say, a Word file.
Mm-hmm.
So every time a brief has been discussed internally and brainstormed, the next exercise for the designer is to design on a Word file. Write it down. Write anything and everything that comes to your mind, then put it in a flow in the same Word file. Okay. Think of all possible edge cases at that particular instant within the Word file. And by Word file, I don't mean Microsoft Word. It could be a note-taking tool, it could be Notion, it could be Medium, it could be anything that is private to you and can be shared.
Yep.
The idea is to get your thoughts to flow out in words. Okay. The minute you do it, you are free to look at something visually. Okay. You don't have to think of colors. You don't have to think of placements. You don't have to think of all those constraints that you have created for yourself as visual designers. Okay. So this is an experiment we are running right now. It'll take a while for us to understand if it worked or not. But yeah, that's the case right now.
Totally. I agree with you here. For me, pen and paper works best because I don't have to think about the pixels or colors or the perfect shapes.
So, as much as I agree with the whole paper, pen, word concept, I think a lot of design happens uh, while you're discussing something. Okay. And that is one of the reasons why I think solo designers should not exist. Okay. Or a solo consultant or a solo freelancer should not exist. Because the best they can do is have a discussion with a possible client who may or may not know what's required. Okay. A better discussion to have is possibly with your user or sometimes with your customer. Okay. And as much as it's confusing, your customers could be very different from your users. And yet it is imperative that you have these discussions, these sessions, okay, of throwing things out. Okay. Don't worry about things being impractical or wild and so on. And that is the whole point of discussing. Okay. So what if we went completely wild with our ideas and thought of this? Is that a possibility? Okay. A simple framework here is what some of the people use as a first principle concept. Okay. Very recently, Himani, who's our senior UX designer, took an internal class on first principles, and she came up with a very interesting notion to explain first principles to people, uh, which is the kind of problem we get typically as designers. So let's say you get a client who wants you to rethink a brush design, a toothbrush design. As first principle, you will think of it very differently. And mind you, you don't need paper right there. You don't need a Word file. You don't need a Figma file. You don't need anything like that. You don't even need to make wireframes. The first thing you need to do is understand why and how people brush their teeth. Of course, then you start taking notes, right? And you can take your notes the way you want. Okay. You can take it on your hand. You can take it on your phone. You can take it on paper. It doesn't really matter till the time you're taking those notes. So why do people brush their teeth? When do they brush their teeth? And so on. Then you start realizing that people have to brush their teeth because they eat food. Why do they eat food? Okay. And like that, if you keep questioning that why, maybe 5 or 6 times, you will reach a point where you realize that there are so many possibilities from here on as compared to what the client demanded. So let's go to the client and start discussing all of these possibilities. Okay. You might end up overwhelming your client. But that is the way discussions need to be tuned. Because the idea is not just to come up with slightly derivative kind of design. We are not just going one step further. And this is how products have been created differently in the past. That is the reason why 2007 saw an iPhone coming into the picture as opposed to the hit levels of BlackBerry. So if you notice, most of the other companies were trying to come up with a better model for what existed as a BlackBerry. BlackBerry in itself was very different from the kind of phones that existed before. BlackBerry didn't try to one up Nokia and say we will create a cool screen. BlackBerry understood that we are not even targeting the masses. We are going to target professionals and business oriented people. And these are the key intents these people have. And that's how the phone got created. The same thing happened to iPhone. The reason I'm not talking about iPhone as much and also saying BlackBerry so that we don't get into the whole cliche of, wow, Apple knows it. Okay. An interesting thing that Apple does very often and we tend to overlook is every time Apple is wrong, they admit to it and cut themselves off it very, very quickly. Every time they've come up with a product that didn't work, they have been sane enough to dump it down, right? Instead of trying to oversell it.
Yeah, not a lot of people would remember Apple gaming consoles.
Right, absolutely. I mean, there are so many aspects to design that as designers we tend to ignore every day. As designers, we think what we need to understand is probably what people think of colors, right? And what people think of colors is a very, very generic notion that has been written time and again in blogs. Okay, so red is for passion, red is for danger. Okay, if people think that and designers think the same, there is no difference. But unfortunately, designers are exposing themselves to the same level of theory, whereas they need to be thinking about a completely different array of subjects. Designers need to expose themselves to, let's say, economics of things. Okay, they need to probably understand a lot more about game theory. Okay, they need to see things from a purely psychological angle. They need to read a lot of history and see where are things coming from. Why do we have this baggage? Why have things not changed? Why do things will change? Right? Designers need to understand human behavior. Designers need to probably club economics and human behavior and come up with behavior economics. All of this is something we are missing on a daily basis. We are focused on colors, we are focused on tools, we are focused on trends, we are focused on titles, and so on. There is nothing beyond the level of these visual elements or these self-claiming professors that exist. We are happy in our own small bubble of this world.
Yeah, I've been like studying, playing around with psychology a lot, and what I've seen is behavioral economics has been on the rise. Like, if you see in West European countries, they have been experimenting a lot with how behavioral economics can influence general design, and it is exciting. And once today's designers, our design communities embrace behavioral economics, things will change. Yeah, but
Yeah, absolutely.
but I have something more to ask you.
Sure.
Designers are fighting about tools and stuff, and like there's nothing we can do about it. But there are new technologies coming
Hmm.
up, like GPT-3, like what OpenAI launched, no code, which are good, but still very flashy and kind of like people don't know what they actually are. So, what are your thoughts on that? And I ask because I run a no-code startup,
Yes.
and I would be
Hmm.
like excited. I am excited to know what your thoughts are, being a designer for so long and seeing all these new technologies around.
The interesting thing about no code overall is that it has existed since donkey's years. It's just that suddenly we see it as a trend or as a hashtag being used a little too often. Uh, so WordPress has always existed. So WordPress is one of the forms of no code, right? Then there have been multiple portfolio websites that never required you to kind of code. I don't want to name them, but all of those websites that existed, right? Uh, think of your Behance profile. It's a no code. The only code sometimes you end up putting there is the hex code for your color, nothing else, right? And much before all of this existed, platforms like GeoCities. Okay, so GeoCities was, if I remember it right, was by Yahoo.
Okay, I thought it's from Geo.
The spellings are different, so it's GEO. So GeoCities would give you server space, would give you the no-code access to creating websites, which they used to call themes. And you, as a Yahoo user, could end up creating infinite number of websites. And if you're a little smart about it, you could use GeoCities as your server space to start storing files. So that was your cloud way before cloud happened. That was your Dropbox, technically.
Which year was this, by the way?
This is 2002.
I was 4 years old in 2002, so
Okay. Okay. I mean, I was super lazy and I kind of didn't really trust the pen drives and the flash drives.
Mm-hmm.
So for all these kind of files, what I would do typically is I would upload all these files on GeoCities and then give the link to my freelance clients at that point of time to download. Okay. So all of this worked way before all of this became cool. So it's not surprising, it's not shocking, it's not something new overall. Uh, think of all of these new trends and technologies like to take a physical analogy, think of it like microwave.
Okay.
Okay, and it's important for us to understand how microwave overall was created. Okay, it was an accident. All of these technologies, all of these tools are happy accidents. Okay, microwave I think was discovered in the first set as a heating tool by this guy named Percy Spencer. Okay, so he was I think conducting an experiment, and by chance he had a few candy bars in his pants pocket. Okay, so he was essentially trying to improve the radar while he was in this room, which is technically filled with microwaves. He realized this his pants were leaking of candy. Okay, now for a scientist, it's very easy to put two and two together. Now comes in design, not science. When you notice this kind of phenomena, it's very easy to take it from multiple perspectives. Okay, but maybe you want to think it from a perspective of as many people as possible and see what is going to impact them. He could have very well seen this and could have tried to create a trouser that doesn't get affected by melted candy. He could have thought of creating a candy that doesn't melt, right? All possible solutions, all possible inventions, right? Instead, he tried to see that there was something in the room that heated the candy enough to melt it. He didn't try to create a stain remover for trousers. He tried to test out if this works only with candies or could he test it with eggs. Okay. He tried to test it with, let's say, popcorns. And that's how you realize that microwaves can cook. And comes the idea of a microwave. Okay. It doesn't stop there. Whenever you're creating such a thing, it is not going to be useful in its first attempt, not even in its 10th attempt. It's going to take 50 attempts, if not more. Imagine as a designer, you don't have that perseverance to go along. In your second attempt, you say, "Oh God, I'll have to redo it." That's a lot of work, and you give up. Isn't that what we do typically as designers, right? Every time we create something and someone comes along and gives us feedback, and you think, "Oh my God, this is a lot of rework." So we kill our possibility of creating something as substantial as, let's say, a microwave. Scientists are tuned very differently. They don't give up that easily. They sometimes actually dedicate their whole life to fine tune and get it right, which is how designers need to think, right? The minute that starts happening, I think we would have, created a very, very cool side of design. And that is the kind of coolness I would want to run towards. This is the coolness that will push the world ahead. This is the coolness that will give design its meaning. And we won't be worried about skeuomorphic or neomorphic or some other morphic kind of designs. I don't know if it makes sense, but this is the gibberish I keep thinking all the time.
it does make sense, and it's not gibberish. It's a lot of interesting stuff,
Yeah.
and we love picking your mind on a lot of stuff we talked about.
Okay. My next question to you is, what is the future of smart devices? Like, right now, we are designing for smartphones, desktops, and TVs. But do you think in next 5 years the mainstream will be something different than this? Like voice assistants, maybe AR, maybe VR? I think voice assistants will be coming first. Why I'm saying this? Because it's more affordable now, like Google Home, Amazon Echo, even Apple. Uh, so, what do you think a designer should learn next for sustaining in the market in next 5 years?
Honestly, if we were to, predict anything, uh, it's going to be very very big of ours. The reason for that is we don't know all the possible things that are going to impact this future. Okay, design is not the only one. Technology is not the only one. There are a lot of other aspects that end up impacting what becomes the norm in the future and what doesn't. So let me give you a very quick example. Today, we are fighting a fight with plastics, and the fight is mostly because they are not biodegradable. What if I was to tell you that around 1940s, someone came up with a biodegradable version of plastics, but it never became a norm for n number of reasons. Okay, and now we have forgotten about it. I just want us designers to understand how predictions work, okay, or how the future creation works. So future creation works a lot on perseverance, a lot on what ticks someone else's dogs. There are a lot of factors that go into defining what becomes the norm. And it is very easy for us to sit in our chairs and make a very, very imprecise prediction. And imprecise predictions have the tendency to go right because they're imprecise, they're not precise. I could easily say that in next 10 years, the world is going to see its lowest economic scale of the last century. Okay, it's very imprecise. I'm not telling you the date. I'm not telling you the month. I'm not telling you the year. I'm not telling you the value, right? So the future of design is like that. What should we do as designers? We need to equip ourselves with as many knowledge subjects as possible. We need to understand business, we need to understand economics, we need to understand psychology, human behavior sciences, uh, game theory, and whatever else we can get our hands on. So there's a very interesting concept that I personally follow. We need to become polymaths. Okay. Okay. We need to know a lot about a lot of things and then start connecting the dots. And even if you don't like it, the minute you start knowing a lot about a lot of things, those dots will get automatically connected. Okay. And that's the beauty of knowledge transforming into wisdom. We designers need to equip ourselves with a lot of wisdom. But that can only happen once we start equipping ourselves with this varied set of knowledge and start internalizing it. It's not like reading a book. We read a book because it's cool to read a book. We read a book because we want to finish a book. We don't read a book because we want to understand what is really written there. The minute we start reading things like that, a book or a blog or an article or an essay, those dots will automatically start getting connected. Okay. I was reading this very interesting article on how human language would have started. Okay. So it's difficult to predict the future. It's also very difficult to predict the history of things, right? And that article goes into multiple perspectives about the possibilities of how language started. And I was wondering, why are designers not thinking like that? Why does it take a journalist to think like that? Why does it take a scientist to think like that? And not designers. The minute we understand how a language would have possibly started, we could possibly see the way it could go in the future. But since we only know the present and not the past, it's very difficult to understand the future, right? The article tries to argue it from so many sides that the language could have started with just sign language. Okay. And it could be the reason why our hands are built the way they are built. Okay. It could be the reason why the front of your hand is always a lot lighter, a lot fairer than the back of your hand. Okay. It could be a reason why your hands expand and your feet don't. Okay. Uh, it is also a possibility that if you start noticing kids, the newborn babies, they start with the whole gestures of things, right? They start kind of expanding their hands and calling out for things before something comes to their mouth as a word, right? The same article goes completely on the other side and starts talking about how this is not possible and how we started with words. And that's how we need to think as designers. We can't be tied to an idea, we need to explore the whole plethora of things. The minute that starts happening, those dots will start connecting. Okay? The minute we start understanding humans, we will start understanding ourselves. We will start understanding the weaknesses a human mind has. We will start understanding that how humans impulsively respond to emotions and find it extremely difficult to understand stats and numbers.
This reminds me a lot of an office hour session by Professor Scott Galloway.
Hmm.
Yeah, he was like talking about WeWork, Uber, and why it happened, what happened at their top levels. Because
Okay.
they couldn't understand the numbers involved, like billions and billions of dollars, and
Oh,
like they all got in like they got swayed by a lot of things.
right, right. So humans don't really respond to numbers too easily. Even the best of mathematicians are slow with statistics, because human mind is not built like that. Human mind is built to respond uh, to cues and not specifics, right? The minute we designers start understanding these basics and start practicing them on a daily basis, I think the whole DNA of design will change worldwide.
Talking about communities, we have a lot of communities, design communities to be specific, in India. Uh, and talking about your design community, OpenV. So, what made you start this community? Like, what did you want to change, and what is the road you're going to take further with OpenV? Because right now, as I see, it's a very close knit community, less than 2,000 members. No, I think it's more now. Yeah, but yeah. So, what is the road you're going to take with OpenV?
So OpenWe honestly thought of kind of came to us when we were trying to work with a client, and the client was from a very different industry, and they wanted to kind of create a community and so on. And when we were brainstorming about it, and this was with our CTO, Saurabh. Saurabh is no more. He passed away earlier this year. He had been fighting with cancer for a while. But this was with him. This was early last year, 2019. We both were just, discussing, and even with his illness, he was super excited about these kind of things. And he said, "यार ये तो weekend project है, जल्दी से जल्दी कुछ बनाते हैं, and let's get out with it. इसमें इतना सोचना क्या है?" And literally, he created that what I used to call version -1 in 2 days over a Saturday and Sunday. And on Monday, he was after my life to make it live. And me being me, I was trying to kind of, think about it before we present it to the world and so on. So last year, May, we kind of, outed it, and we saw a lot of people joining it, even though it was a very, very crude version. So earlier this year, as soon as COVID hit, we thought, okay, this is a great time to rethink what OpenV stands for, and let's go back to our original idea. Original idea was pretty simple. Of all the communities that exist around design and creativity, most of these communities are built around work. So I get to see your visual work, and that's about it. And because I'm seeing your visual work, a lot of our interaction and discussion is purely going to be about that work, and a lot of backpats. That wow, what a nice, cool thing that you've created. This is looking so cute. This is looking so nice, and all those kind of cliched responses in terms of comments. But I won't ever get to learn from you. I won't ever have this dialogue that we are having right now. Then go to the other spectrum, which is a lot of webinars, a lot of, events where there is one guy talking who's the star and there are people listening. Again, the whole exchange of ideas, the whole exchange of discussion is a miss. Going back to technologists, geeks, all of these guys have kind of figured it out. They have created communities where they're able to find one topic and just, have these lengthy discussions on top of them. Hacker News is a great example. And I was wondering, why does design or creative side of life not have anything like Hacker News? Okay, and that's the base. That's the basic nodal notion here. Okay, that is how OpenWe started, and that is what OpenWe is aiming to be. Having said that, there is a lot of possibilities around creative space. So, for example, why should your profile look as bland as how it looks on other professional platforms? Okay, why do I need to process a lot of information to differentiate between someone who's worked at a job for 3 months versus 3 years? It looks the same. So, can I represent it visually somehow and make it look apart? Okay, can we create a platform which is not giving you suggestions of random strangers to kind of connect with, but instead is first of all giving you suggestions of people you know to start connecting with? Okay, can we create a platform which is a lot more human and a lot more lifelike? Okay, that is where the idea was born, and that is how we started pivoting. I think in a month or so we should be out giving the first set of entry and exposure to the initial audience, and from there on we plan to kind of grow and involve as many creative people as possible worldwide.
Okay. So my last question to you is, what legacy you want to build?
I think a great legacy will be some kind of influence on the rest of the world, that all of us have a very, very key part in building the future. All of us need to be designers in some way. All of us need to be makers in some way. All of us are participants, but perhaps we need to be a lot more active in our participation. The minute we let go of that complacency in our lives, the minute we start taking the harder routes, I think that is a great legacy to have influenced.